let's get some cartoons and vodka and do them all night long. Are you ready for some fun? Drink 'em down, drink 'em down, drink 'em down. Drink 'em down, drink 'em down, drink 'em down.
I'm back from the internet mines, and that means it's time to talk about questionable content. Last time, Faye had just revealed to Martin her deep inner trauma, so that means it's time to introduce new characters.
Faye goes into work and gives Dora the, I assume, abridged Book of Ninja Fighting version of events. Martin grabs Steve for some middle-of-the-day drinking, which, like a good supportive friend, he is down for once he understands the gravity of what has transpired. And hey, look, it's Redneck Barfly Jimbo. He'll be back later. After 6 hours of slowly pickling his liver, Martin goes for a bathroom break where he meets this chick who gives him some constructive criticism on his life, which he apparently has been loudly sharing with the other bar patrons. Martin also happens to be pissing in the ladies' room sink.
This is Hannelore, the fan-favorite character I suggested was being hinted at in the last section, but I might be right there, because there's an author note about how he's been planning this character for ages.
Now, her first page appearance giving Martin straightforward life advice might give you a very wrong impression of this character, but her very next page fixes this with her wondering whether this entire bar meetup is just her hallucinating because she hasn't slept in 4 days because she was busy counting the hairs on her head. Hannelore has severe OCD and germophobia and is just a giant pile of neuroses. She makes a living counting things for people through her website, which is crazy but totally believable as a thing people would pay for. After some more fun bar chatter, she invites Martin back to her place to play Scrabble, which she is very clear is actually Scrabble and not sex because ew, gross fluids. But then, what's this? It turns out Hanners lives in the same apartment building as Martin, which isn't stalkerish at all. Martin meets her Apple brand Anthro-PC Winslow, who has been getting some internet harassment from Pint Size. After trouncing Martin in Scrabble, Hanners accidentally lets slip that she knows Martin's full name despite having no business knowing this. He runs to get the taser while Hanners tries to explain she really does want to just make friends, and then Martin accidentally tases himself. Faye comes back to a stuttering Hannelore trying to explain she was just trying to make friends without seeming creepy.
Mission accomplished!
Faye was having a girls' night with Dora and Raven at a bar where Sven plays. Raven flashed him her tits because he's hot. Meanwhile, Dora is really conflicted about how to handle the Martin-Faye debacle. She thinks Martin is hot and would love to swoop in and seduce his pants off, but is aware of how that would look considering what just went down between him and Faye. Raven is not a source of sound moral guidance in this scenario for Dora. Raven reveals a bit of her inner intelligence around now, playing secret matchmaker for Martin and Dora by sending them out to pick up lunch, while also making time for Faye to research into therapists without people around to look over her shoulder, making her uncomfortable. Dora gets some not-so-subtle flirting on with Martin, but he's not a very bright boy and doesn't notice. Meanwhile, Hanner shows up at the coffee shop and gives Faye some tips on therapists. Then in the evening, Dora makes a controversial move and just seduces Martin.
By controversial, I mean a bunch of fans got mad at her in the old forums, which I haven't really bothered to look at. But I can totally see where they're coming from. There isn't a roadmap for what to do when a relationship doesn't even start because of emotional trauma, but you should probably wait more than 2 days.
Faye pulls out the good friend card and lets them both know she's not gonna interfere in this because she's their friend and she's trying not to make everything about her. It also helps that she's going back home to visit her mom and sister the next day and is spared a lot of the absurdly saccharine early courtship days. Faye's trip home is packed with powerful stuff, from visiting her dad's grave to discussing his suicide with her mom. It's still funny at times, but it's good that there's follow-up on this topic. Now, you'd think that Martin and Dora getting together would have larger story consequences, but aside from a smidge of angst, it doesn't actually spawn a lot of stories right now. They behave differently with each other, but Martin still just hangs out at the coffee shop. It does spawn a decent enough running gag where Faye thinks they are off having sex, but they are actually just caught up in ridiculous scenarios that sound like terrible excuses. We weren't having sex, lunch went long because we got caught up in a Shaolin assassination attempt. It's a funny enough bit, but it's mercifully dropped when they do bang. Faye's struggling to handle them in a relationship. It's clear she feels like her two best friends are a bit gone now, replaced by this hybrid goth demon. Some of this chunk is Faye dealing with two men, Sven and Angus. Angus is a guy who comes into the coffee shop to get into verbal sparring matches. He's got a crush on Faye, but he also seems to genuinely come in just to get sarcasmed at, like it recharges his batteries or something. He's a tad aggressive in his approach, never really taking no for an answer.
Dudes watch too many romantic comedies. He gets better later.
Now Sven, being Dora's brother, has a big no-date sign hanging over his head. Also, he's a philandering jackass. But Faye calling him out on this while not surrendering to his seduction gaze makes him feel kinda bad for treating women like disposable objects. They strike up a friendship that's awkward as hell cause Sven is clearly not used to interacting with women who don't want to fuck him. To his credit, he does genuinely seem to want to be her friend. Faye mostly hangs with him as a way of not seeing Dora and Martin snogging off of each other, but as she reveals to her therapist, the issue with Angus and Sven is that they are assholes, but they are hot assholes, and her garden needs tilling. In other romance news, Steve's breakup with Ellen leads to a big story where he runs afoul of the Vespa-venger, a girl on a Vespa who beats up shitty ex-boyfriends. She even has a website. She heard Steve and Martin talking about his breakup and mistakenly thought Steve was being a jackass. The attack has some actual speed lines, really setting it apart stylistically from what has happened so far. Faye and Dora hatch a plan to fake a breakup fight and lure her into an alley for retribution. This plan goes awry when her Vespa turns out to be a government murder bot with laser headlights. The crew is saved by Pint Size and his robot buddies hitting the thing with bricks.
Only in questionable content.
A seemingly minor change that has long repercussions is Martin gets a new job. He took a long break from his shitty office job, and when he comes back, he finds out the entire department has been laid off, so the executives could afford to give themselves bonuses.
Timely or timeless?
Martin applies to and eventually starts working at the local women's college library. His major qualification is not being a high-off-his-tits college student. Smith appears to be a party school where Martin's new boss, Ty, will throw raver parties, get high on LSD, and have lesbian polydrama. Ty is a free spirit in the cast and sticks around for ages. It's also just funny watching her ask Martin for tips on juggling her girlfriends. She's also interested in the latest novel from our redneck barfly Jimbo. Jimbo got a job writing fantasy novels like March of the Sword Princess Leahefera. Tay enjoys them for how hilariously terrible they are, so I guess Jimbo is a less gay version of Chuck Tingle. In other side character news, the coffee shop got a big boost in customers after a local newspaper praises them for giving you that authentic, we hate your guts sass that you just don't get at Starbucks. So they get a bunch of new customers looking to get verbally harassed, and Faye is ecstatic. But this also means they need some more staff, so they basically force this new blonde girl Penelope to work for them. She came in for coffee, and after discussing whether she was secretly Pizza Girl the superhero, they almost force her to work the machine. Penelope is a tad straight-laced and basic, which makes her pair really well comedically with the rest of the shop. I can't imagine her being anyone's favorite character, but she's stuck around to this day. Robo shenanigans really ramped up with Pint Size getting a partner in crime in Winslow. They also have some fun with Hannelore's Roomba. Steve meets a girl named Mina who works at the morgue. They have a weird, jokey chemistry, but then he meets her ex-boyfriend, still current roommate, who she broke up with because he's such a nice guy that he made Mina feel insecure, so she cheated on him.
This relationship is made out of so many red flags, the entire team is thrown off the soccer field.
Last minor happening of note is that the band Martin is in gets named Death Mole, and Hannelore joins as the drummer. Drummer Hannelore is just one of the best things. Martin asks because they need a drummer, she has disposable income, and it's fine if she learns along the way because Natalie is learning guitar as well. Hannelore calls her therapist to see if joining a rock band is a good idea, and the peals of derisive laughter really flips her rebellion switch. And it turns out, in her usual Hannelore way, she's really good at drumming because it's just counting with your whole body. She proceeds to not sleep for the next 18 hours as she practices drumming.
A good bit of this chunk is just meeting and getting to know Hannelore. In spite of her awkward introduction, Dora, Martin, and Faye pretty quickly adopt her as their friend, and it's not hard to see why she's a fan favorite.
Hannelore is a giant pile of neuroses and tics and OCD. And I'm not gonna front, a lot of this is played for laughs. Some in just how wild her antics get, but other times her having a panic attack until she exhausts herself and falls asleep in the coffee shop is the funny. There's some element of laughing at her, but she's clearly a character Jeff has a lot of fondness for. It's fair to say he channels some of his anxieties into Hannelore. What makes her so likable is the range of reactions she expresses. Sometimes she's super neurotic and can barely handle being near people. Other times she forgets to shower for a whole 2 days because she's learning drums. Her issues are very dependent on her mental state and her current level of medication. We get to meet her mom, who is the kind of super evil capitalist who laments not being able to openly blackmail people or throw them in volcanoes. It's over the top for laughs, but yeah, she's pretty awful. Then Hannelore bets her mother several $1,000s that she can go into the men's room and touch the toilet. Which she does, because how dare her mother make light of her anxieties. But she still has to get her hand into some alcohol stat.
Hannelore is just loaded down with anxiety and issues, but still very adamantly has friends and a life. That's inspiring to see. Of course people love her. So that's this 500-page chunk of questionable content in a nutshell. At this point, you should really be reading along with me. The art has improved a lot. It's much more readable. And it's going to take me like 6 more videos to get through this, so do not be afraid of reading ahead of me. Till next time, I'm Pluto Burns, and this has been Eagle Land.